Warning, this video contains explicit details involving sexual assault. Viewer discretion is advised. In early 2024, news broke out that Vince McMahon was being sued by former WWE employee Janell Grant for sexual assault and sex trafficking. This sparked an investigation into McMahon by the federal government. John Laurinaitis, Kevin Dunn, and Brock Lesnar were also named in the filings, along with other top-level executives within WWE that have since remained anonymous. Since that news hit, Brock Lesnar has since been placed on hiatus by WWE, McMahon has resigned, Kevin Dunn smartly left the company just a few weeks prior, and John Laurinaitis has gone on defense mode. That last point brings us here, as Johnny Ace, in an effort to save his own ass, has seemingly flipped on Vince McMahon by having his attorneys drop a huge bombshell. That bombshell has to do with none other than the late Ashley Massaro. A Vice News article detailed that, according to Laurinaitis, Vince McMahon knew about the long-rumored assault that Massaro suffered during a tour of Kuwait in 2006. Not only did WWE know about this assault, but McMahon also humiliated Massaro and ended her tenure with WWE after she allegedly refused to sleep with him. At one point, Massaro was one of the hottest stars in the company after successfully landing a cover spot on Playboy magazine, and is certainly one of the more memorable divas from the mid-2000s. She was a personal favorite of mine, as I had a huge crush on her during my youth. In an attempt to honor her legacy in any way that I can, I like to shed some light on her situation. Hopefully Massaro gets the justice she rightfully deserves if the alleged happenings indeed took place. Sadly, she is no longer here to see the impact that her story has had on society. Without further ado, I present to you Ashley Massaro, from superstar to tragedy. Ashley Massaro was born on May 26, 1979 in New York City, New York. She was born to a family of amateur wrestlers, as her father, uncle, and brother competed in the sport, meaning that she was no stranger to wrestling. She was approached by a WWE talent coach at a swimsuit competition in early 2005 and was offered a spot in the upcoming Diva Search competition, which she won. She was the clear standout of the group, with the only other contestant of note being Crystal Marshall. Massaro was on top of the world after winning the contest, as she began her career in WWE by feuding with Candice Michelle, Tori Wilson, and then later Mickie James. She even wrestled Melina for the WWE Women's Championship in what was technically the co-main event of WrestleMania 23. The following year at WrestleMania 24, Massaro teamed with Maria Kanellis with Snoop Dogg in their corner to face Beth Phoenix and Melina in a 5-minute match that defines what this era of women's wrestling was. Perhaps her greatest claim to fame was her gracing the cover of the April 2007 edition of Playboy magazine. I remember at the time, her getting Playboy seemed kind of random, since she wasn't featured on TV as much as some of the other women from her era. Nevertheless, she graced the cover and became a very memorable figure for us ruthless aggression era kids. This is around the time when things got really weird for Ashley. In 2016, Massaro took part in a lawsuit with several other wrestlers regarding concussions. She gave some statements regarding an alleged sexual assault she suffered at the hands of a member of the US Armed Forces, and that Vince McMahon preyed on female wrestlers. Not only did he prey on female wrestlers, but according to Massaro, he also gave her bad scripts intended to damage her reputation after she rejected his sexual advances. In an article published by Vice News, which I referenced earlier, in February of 2024, author Tim Marchman gave more details of the previously unreleased statements. Massaro stated that she often saw Vince McMahon making out with the women's wrestlers in the locker room throughout her early days with the company, and that she assumed she was not his type since he never made any passes at her. That all changed once she got the cover of Playboy. WWE offered her to fly on the private jet and stay at the same hotels as the top-ranking executives during this time of heightened popularity so that she could spend time with her daughter. Soon enough, McMahon began attempts to summon her to his private hotel room, to which she denied. Apparently, McMahon does not take rejection well, so he began calling her cell phone and hotel room non-stop. She began to feel extraordinarily uncomfortable, as she phrased it, so she decided to call up a trusted WWE employee in Kevin Dunne with hopes that he would be an ally. He allegedly told her to tell Vince that she was feeling sick and that she'd see him at TV tomorrow. Jim Cornette, when reacting to this statement on his podcast, The Jim Cornette Experience, speculated that Kevin Dunne had been coached up on what to do in this situation when one of the girls is feeling uncomfortable by his actions. Man, that's just sick in so many ways. This company's culture at the time was nothing short of uncomfortable, and to think so many of us grew up watching wrestling during our innocent, formidable years, while all this stuff was going on. Little did we know that the people running the company were so crooked on so many levels. I mean, they had like a code phrase. Dunne tells her to tell Vince that she's sick, which is like a cue to say that she's not down to do weird things with him. And what happens when you refuse the boss's advances? As Michael Hayes put it to Massaro, quote, "Well, kid, these are the breaks." Vince tried to put a stop to her career and made her work life so uncomfortable with bad scripts and allegedly saying lewd things to her in front of the other wrestlers and executives that she eventually asked for her early release from WWE in 2008. She never really had anything to do with wrestling after, except for a brief stint on the indie scene with Jillian Hall in 2017. According to the Vice article, Ashley received one of the handwritten scripts by Vince and went up to Michael Hayes to get an explanation, to which he replied, "Who the hell wrote this? You're not saying that." That's when she informed him that Vince wrote it, and he told her that was the breaks, kid. To have your livelihood and career taken away after being on top of the world, all because you don't want to sleep with your boss, is disgusting, and likely led to some of the mental issues that Ashley battled for the rest of her life. This part of Ashley's statements never made the original lawsuit since her attorneys decided to focus on the matter that they were suing for originally, which was concussions. I am assuming here that Laurinaitis and his team are leaking all of this information and helping to make Massaro's statements public to save himself. Man, the wrestling world is chaos. One of the segments that is still visible on the internet is one featuring Matt Hardy, Vince, and Ashley, where Ashley spills coffee on McMahon. McMahon then proceeds to berate Ashley for roughly 2 minutes, in what at the time was an uncomfortable segment. Now, after knowing more about the situation and all the behind the scenes happening, that segment is simply unwatchable. The next part of Massaro's affidavit that Laurinaitis' team commented on is where things get a little more uncomfortable, if that is even at all remotely possible. In the summer of 2006, Massaro boarded a flight to Kuwait with Jimmy Hart, Ron Simmons, and Maria Kanellis to entertain the troops stationed in the dangerous area. The country is bordered by Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and at the time was a hotbed for conflict. What was supposed to be a wholesome, heartfelt tour for the WWE and for Massaro ended up turning very dark for her. Likely this experience haunted her until her very last days. Massaro's statement to her attorney gave graphic details of an alleged sexual assault that the diva suffered at the hands of a member of the United States Armed Forces. She recalled not feeling well with pelvic pain accompanied by feelings of exhaustion, which the members of the medical staff speculated were symptoms of dehydration, which was then common in Kuwait. So she was brought back to a medical tent with the help of a staff member to receive treatment. She recalled having an IV put on her arm to give her strength. She stated that while she was laying in the bed waiting for a doctor to come back, that a man in cargo shorts and an orange shirt entered the room accompanied by a woman. The woman stood guard by the door as the man put a substance in her IV bag, which then caused her to become sedated. The substance that was used is no longer accepted medical practice when treating people with pelvic discomfort, as most practitioners require the patient to be coherent while receiving care now. Massaro then recalled that the man penetrated and sodomized her while she lied there unconscious. She stated that every second this went on were the worst moments of her life. Paul London, who dated Massaro around this time, talked about Massaro's experience on an episode of Rene Dupree's podcast, Café de Rene. London recalled that earlier in the day, Massaro overheard the soldiers discussing how it was the assailant's birthday that day. Considering that there was another woman guarding the door, London speculated that the assault was orchestrated as a birthday gift for the assailant. Man, to make matters worse, Vince McMahon and the WWE knew about this assault, according to Laurinaitis' lawyers. For years, WWE consistently denied any knowledge of the incident ever taking place by releasing statements whenever the news would circulate about the situation. The company stated that Massaro never reported to anyone about the incident. Laurinaitis claims that he, McMahon, and at least Kevin Dunn were aware of it, as they were all present during a meeting that took place with Massaro. Allegedly, Vince McMahon instructed Massaro to not tell anyone about what happened that day in Kuwait because it would put a bad light on all of the good things that the armed forces do while putting the company's relationship with them at risk. I read a quote that Massaro gave to WWE.com just prior to the situation for an article hyping up that trip to Kuwait, and it is just heartbreaking to read. She says, quote, "Anything can happen going over to the Middle East, but my company takes care of me, and I trust them," end quote. Massaro then continued, "I have full faith that I will come back exactly the way I left, if not a little bit better in the heart." She definitely did not return home better. She didn't even come back exactly the way she left. She returned home with the memories and trauma of an absolutely awful situation at the hands of the ones who are supposed to be protecting our freedoms. And worst of all, she tells her boss and several other people within her employer what transpired, and the response from Vince McMahon is, well, We don't want to ruin our relationship with the troops, so you'll just have to keep that quiet. Man, that is truly awful. Ashley was a beautiful woman on the outside, and according to several of her peers and fans that were lucky enough to get to know her, a beautiful soul on the inside. So after this news broke out, a woman, and I don't even want to say her name, a woman claiming to be a friend of Ashley Massaro conducted an interview with a media outlet discussing the situation and Massaro's feelings toward it. After the interview aired, Massaro's daughter took to Twitter to provide a statement about the interview and the woman who partook in it, claiming to be a friend of Ashley's. In the statement, Massaro's daughter said that the woman was not a friend of Ashley's at the time of her passing, and that Ashley would not want anyone, including her, speaking about her name in the media. A news article dropped shortly before I recorded this video on DDT Wrestling that contained information on the investigation that was conducted by the US Armed Forces into the incident after Massaro's death in 2019. For the record, Laurinaitis stated that WWE knew of the assault. However, he stated that WWE did not discourage Massaro from reporting, and that WWE did not help to cover it up. This report from DDT states otherwise. However, I stress that this is all alleged. The investigation found that WWE's PR chief Gary Davis was banging on the facility door while Massaro was getting treated. However, he was not interviewed as part of the investigation. Allegedly, when Davis was looking for her, the perpetrators threw a dirty blanket on Massaro as she was naked. Davis then picked her up and carried her to her hotel room and instructed her to call him or one of WWE's entourage to pick her up when she awoke. She was drowsy from the substance she had been injected with, likely was just assaulted, and was just told to sleep it off by WWE's PR chief. The doctor that did treat her stated that she showed no signs of sexual assault, and the investigators could not track down the location of the medical facility as it likely was not there anymore when the investigation was conducted 13 years later in 2019. After the investigation, the law enforcement threw out the case since Massaro had passed on and there was a lack of evidence of any wrongdoing. As I said earlier, Massaro was a beautiful soul and did not deserve any of this alleged mistreatment. She went on to be released in 2008 from WWE, citing a need to take care of her sick daughter. But in reality, I'm sure she was tired of the humiliating segments, the harassment by Vince, and the otherworldly mistreatment of her assault case. Massaro would do occasional appearances at conventions and autograph signings, but she never really dabbled in the wrestling business again. Which was odd considering that several of the divas from her era made sporadic appearances for the company in later years. I guess Vince McMahon really did put an end to her career and made sure she'd never be heard from again because she rejected his advances. She worked at a radio station in New York most recently in 2019, and just a few days after posting on Twitter about fan mail that she responded to, Massaro was a no-show to her radio job, and after police went to her house to check on her, they discovered her dead by suicide at age 39, just 10 days prior to her 40th birthday. The tale of Ashley Massaro is one of the absolute most tragic tales in the history of pro wrestling and is an extreme example of the bad that can come from it.